Over the last few years, it feels like DEI has become a meaningless buzzword. I see it thrown around by conservatives all the time. It's unfortunate because it actually is a term with real meaning. I say this as someone who hates DEI, been warning about it for years. So I thought it would be fun if we dug into some of the origins of DEI, defined actual terms, and then we check to see how's it doing about a decade or so into implementation. Let's start with the basics. What is DEI? DEI is shorthand for diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI is the ugly sister of the lean-in movement of the early 2010s, where corporations and the media became obsessed with twin concepts. One is that women make less than men for exactly the same job, and two is that diversity of color, gender, or any other cosmetic attribute is an inherent good in and of itself as long as it's a minority. The reason that I've always hated these movements is specifically because they are cosmetic. They are the embodiment of the meme showing a female pilot dropping bombs and the victim saying, "At least it was a woman who killed me this time." If the corporation itself doesn't change and just the makeup of who runs that corporation does, why should we care? Nonetheless, the financial elites embraced lean-in DEI in the 2010s, specifically to dispel ruling class consciousness and especially to weaponize identity. Thus, effectively legalizing sexism and racism became legal in corporate America, where people were specifically hired and promoted for the color of their skin, their gender, or any other cosmetic attribute. Now, obviously, when you put it that way, it sounds illegal and awful. So what corporate America had to do was twofold. One, they had to legitimize the racial and gender-obsessed worldview through the media. Two, they have to prove why this is actually an inherent good for the business. This is where the corporate consultants come in. As the Fortune 500 CEOs clamored to justify DEI, they had to answer to their shareholders, of course. And so they do what they always do. They turn to McKinsey to justify their decision. McKinsey is, of course, happy to oblige, and for the first near decade has been churning out research after research propping up this false religion. From 2015 to 2023, McKinsey published 4 studies that titled, quote, "Diversity Matters," "Delivering Through Diversity," "Diversity Wins, How Inclusion Matters," and "Diversity Matters Even More, The Case for Holistic Impact." As The Spectator writes, quote, "The core claim of each study is that DEI leads to better corporate performance. Thus, more DEI, more profit. It's the same logic as past ESG studies from the last decade." Hilariously, though, just like the collapse of ESG, there has been actual now independent review of said studies, and the results are not as clear-cut as McKinsey may have led us to believe. In fact, a new paper from the Econ Journal, which tested the data within each one of these studies, has concluded that they cannot be replicated at all independently. In fact, they find these studies, quote, "should not be relied on to support the view that U.S. publicly traded firms can expect to deliver improved financial performance if they increase racial and ethnic diversity of their executives." So basically, diversity of executives has no impact whatsoever on whether you make money as a company, which means 2 things. Corporations just paid billions of dollars to race huckster consultants who set up entire firms guiding DEI policies at these companies, and 2, most importantly, they discriminated against people based upon the color of their skin or gender when making hiring decisions. We have proof of this definitively. Bloomberg in September of 2023 ran data to show that in 2000 and 2021 alone, the number of so-called people of color hired at 84 S&P 500 companies had a 94% increase than the year previously. So there was a 94% increase possibly in the number of qualified applicants, or there were a whole lot of people who were hired explicitly because of the color of their skin over others. Now keep in mind, this is a data set of 9 million people who work at the largest and most lucrative firms in the US, including, per Bloomberg, Apple, Walmart, Wells Fargo. Major Fortune 500s across the board, sector by sector. In 2021, that revolution in hiring occurred, and it is certainly a direct violation of equal opportunity provision in the law, which dictates specifically that people should not be hired on race alone. And of course, keep in mind, that's just 2021 data. We have no idea what insanity has been wrought in the last 3 years. This is all done for the sake of diversity itself, with no discernible impact that we can now show on the bottom line. And that's why I'm doing this monologue. If you want to defend the merits of hiring people based purely on the color of their skin or whatever pronouns, then be my guest. But Do not hide behind fake studies that are trotted out at these shareholder conferences. If you want legalized racism, stand up and defend it on its own merits. I suspect that they will not, and they will ignore the results, because when you do, it's just abhorrent to the American character, which is founded in a fundamental belief of actual equality before the law and in striving for equality of opportunity. The farther that we have strayed from that, the more we have only exacerbated and expanded the very class consciousness that DEI was invented to try and to destroy. Very interesting, isn't it?
Hey guys, obviously I had a lot of thoughts on what Saagar had to say there. So if you want to see my thoughts on this monologue and every other Saagar monologue, make sure you subscribe at breakingpoints.com.